Duke Alaric Ashcombe had long accepted that his life would be a quiet one. The great Ashcombe Estate stood in dignified silence that evening, its stone walls warmed by candlelight and the low murmur of polite conversation drifting through the halls. Guests had arrived as expected, nobles of familiar faces and predictable intentions, all drawn by duty rather than delight. Alaric had greeted them with practiced courtesy, his posture impeccable, his expression unreadable. To most, he was the perfect host. To himself, he was merely fulfilling an obligation. At 38, Alaric was considered accomplished by every measure society respected. His lands were prosperous, his reputation unblemished, his name spoken with admiration in Parliament and restraint in scandalous circles. Yet, beneath the weight of titles and expectations lay a truth he rarely acknowledged. His heart had long been removed from the matter of living. Love, he believed, belonged to younger men, to fools, to poets and soldiers who had not yet learned the cost of attachment. He moved through the drawing room slowly, exchanging pleasantries, listening more than he spoke. Crystal glasses clinked softly. Laughter rose and fell with careful restraint. The evening unfolded exactly as he had anticipated. Orderly, uneventful, forgettable. Lady Rowena Vale stood near the hearth, elegant as ever, her presence as intentional as her silence. Society had already decided her future, whispering her name beside his in expectation rather than affection. Alaric felt no discomfort in her gaze, only familiarity, comfort. And comfort, he knew, was not love. Lord Benedict Ashcombe, his cousin and adviser, approached him with a knowing smile. "You endure these evenings remarkably well," Benedict remarked lightly. Alaric allowed a faint smile. "Endurance is an underrated virtue." Benedict studied him for a moment as though weighing whether to say more, then inclined his head. "There is still one guest yet to arrive." Alaric raised an eyebrow. "At this hour?" "Yes," Benedict replied. "I thought it best not to announce her." Before Alaric could question him further, the doors at the far end of the hall opened. No announcement followed. No herald spoke her name. She entered quietly, almost hesitantly, as though uncertain she belonged among the polished floors and candlelit grandeur. Her dress was modest, pale in colour, unfashionable by the evening's standards. Yet there was nothing careless about her appearance. She carried herself with a calm restraint that drew the eye without demanding it. Alaric felt it then, a subtle pause within himself. The woman lifted her gaze, and for a brief, unguarded moment, their eyes met. Something stirred. Not recognition, not attraction as he understood it, but a strange sense of disruption, as though a carefully ordered room had been entered by an unfamiliar scent. She looked away first. Alaric did not move. Around him, conversation resumed. Glasses clinked. Laughter returned. Yet his attention no longer belonged to the room. It followed her as she crossed the floor, as she greeted Benedict with a quiet nod, as she took her place along the edge of the gathering. "She is?" Alaric asked softly. Benedict's reply came after a pause. "Elara Whitcombe." The name settled uneasily in Alaric's chest. He did not yet know why, but for the first time that evening, perhaps for the first time in years, Duke Alaric Ashcombe felt the certainty of his solitude begin to fracture. And somewhere beneath the candlelight and polished manners, the night quietly shifted. By the time the evening candles were fully lit, Duke Alaric Ashcombe already sensed that the night would not proceed as planned. The gathering at Ashcombe Estate was meant to be predictable, an arrangement of polite conversations, careful glances, and alliances dressed as courtesy. Yet something had unsettled the air, a quiet disturbance he could not name. He stood among the guests with practiced ease, responding when spoken to, nodding when expected. Laughter rose and fell around him like distant waves, but his attention drifted repeatedly toward the far end of the room. That was where she stood. Elara Whitcombe did not belong to the glittering circle that surrounded her. Her gown was modest, pale in colour, unadorned by jewels or ribbons meant to draw notice. She stood near a marble column, hands folded lightly before her, as if she were content to remain unseen. And yet, despite herself, she drew the eye. Alaric frowned inwardly at his own distraction. He had not seen her enter. No announcement had been made, no ripple of recognition had followed her arrival. That alone was strange. Guests of Ashcombe Estate were not meant to appear unnoticed. Across the room, Lady Rowena Vale observed everything. Rowena stood near the fireplace, one gloved hand resting against the mantel, her expression calm and unreadable. She had known Duke Alaric for years, long enough to recognise when something had shifted beneath his composed exterior. His posture remained flawless, but his gaze lingered too long in one direction. She followed it. Rowena's eyes landed on Elara, and a flicker of curiosity passed through her. The young woman was unfamiliar. Not nobility, Rowena guessed at once. There was no practiced confidence in her stance, no hunger for attention. And yet, there was something else, an awareness, quiet and watchful, as though she understood far more than she revealed. A servant passed by with a tray of wine. Elara declined softly, her voice barely audible over the hum of conversation. When she moved, it was with restraint, as if careful not to disturb the world around her. Alaric found himself stepping forward before he realised it. Halfway across the room, he stopped. He had no reason to approach her. None that would satisfy reason, at least. His duties demanded restraint. His title demanded distance. And yet, as Elara lifted her gaze, only briefly, her eyes met his. The moment lasted no longer than a breath. But something shifted. Elara looked away first, her fingers tightening slightly at her side. Alaric felt an unfamiliar pull, sharp and unsettling, as though he had been recognised in some way he did not understand. From the edge of the room, Lord Benedict Ashcombe, Alaric's younger brother, watched with narrowed eyes. Benedict had arrived late, and, unlike his brother, he missed little. He saw the glance, he saw the pause, and he smiled faintly, as if already anticipating consequences. None of them yet knew the truth of Elara Whitcombe's presence in that room, nor how deeply this night would bind their fates. But somewhere between candlelight and silence, the first mistake had already been made. Elara Whitcombe had learned long ago the value of remaining unnoticed. It was a skill born not of fear, but of necessity. Yet, as the evening at Ashcombe Estate unfolded, she felt the familiar discipline slipping from her grasp. She was being watched. Not openly, no one stared, no whispers followed her steps, but she felt it all the same. Eyes returned to her when they should not have. Conversations paused for half a breath too long. And most troubling of all, Duke Alaric Ashcombe had not looked away again. Elara kept her gaze lowered as she moved toward the edge of the room, her footsteps quiet against the polished floor. She had not planned to linger. Her purpose here was simple: observe, confirm what she had suspected, and leave without leaving a trace. That plan was already unravelling. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "You're new." She turned to find Lord Benedict Ashcombe standing beside her, a glass of wine in his hand and a curious smile on his lips. Unlike his brother, Benedict wore his charm carelessly, as if it were a game he never tired of winning. "I don't believe we've met," he continued pleasantly. "No," Elara replied, her tone measured. "We haven't." Benedict studied her with open interest. "And yet, you attend a gathering where every guest is known to us. That alone makes you intriguing." Elara inclined her head slightly. "Curiosity often leads people astray." Benedict laughed softly. Spoken like someone with something to hide. Before Elara could respond, Duke Alaric appeared at Benedict's side, his presence altering the space between them instantly. The room seemed to still, as though aware of the shift in power. "Benedict," Alaric said calmly, "you're needed near the terrace." Benedict raised a brow. "Am I?" "Yes." The younger brother's gaze flicked between Alaric and Elara. Whatever he saw there satisfied him. With a nod and a half-smile, he stepped away, leaving silence behind him. For a moment, neither spoke. "I didn't mean to intrude," Alaric said at last. "You didn't," Elara replied. "Your brother did." A corner of Alaric's mouth curved slightly. "That is his habit." They stood facing one another, the space between them carefully maintained, yet charged with something neither could ignore. Candlelight flickered along the dark lines of Alaric's coat, while Elara's pale dress caught the glow softly, as if she belonged to the light rather than the room. "You haven't given your name," Alaric said. Elara hesitated. Names had weight. Names invited questions. "Elara," she said finally. "Elara Whitcombe." Something passed through Alaric's expression, too swift to name but unmistakably sharp. "Whitcombe," he repeated quietly. She noticed it then. The way his attention sharpened, the way his posture shifted ever so slightly. He knew the name, or the history behind it. "I should go," Elara said, stepping back. "Wait." The word escaped him before he could stop it. Elara paused, her hand resting lightly against the back of a chair. "Yes, Your Grace?" Alaric met her gaze fully now, and for the first time, the restraint he wore so carefully faltered. "You don't belong in the shadows," he said. "Not tonight." Elara's breath caught, though she masked it well. "You don't know what I belong to." "Then," Alaric replied softly, "I intend to find out." Across the room, Lady Rowena watched them with narrowed eyes, and from the corridor beyond, Benedict listened. The game had begun, whether Elara wished it or not. Elara Whitcombe did not sleep that night. She lay awake in the small guest chamber she had been offered, far humbler than the grand rooms reserved for titled guests, staring at the faint glow of moonlight tracing the ceiling. The Ashcombe Estate was silent now, yet her thoughts would not still. Duke Alaric's voice lingered in her mind, not for its softness, but for the way he had spoken her name. Whitcombe. He had known it. She was certain. By morning, Elara resolved to leave. Whatever curiosity had drawn her here had been satisfied, and remaining longer invited danger she could not afford. She dressed quietly, fastening her cloak as the estate stirred awake, intending to slip out before breakfast was announced. She had nearly reached the eastern corridor when footsteps sounded behind her. "Running away already?" Lord Benedict Ashcombe leaned casually against a column, dressed as though he had risen hours earlier. His smile was polite, but his eyes were sharp. "I prefer early departures," Elara replied. "So do people with secrets." She met his gaze steadily. "And people who value discretion," Benedict chuckled. "Then you've come to the wrong house. Ashcombes collect truths the way others collect art." Before she could respond, a second presence entered the corridor. Duke Alaric. He looked displeased. "Benedict," he said coolly, "you're needed elsewhere." Benedict raised his hands in mock surrender. Always summoned away at the most interesting moments. He glanced at Elara once more. "Until next time, Miss Whitcombe." The moment Benedict disappeared, silence fell heavy between them. "You were leaving," Alaric said. "Yes." "Because of me?" Elara hesitated. "Because of your name." That caught his attention. "Explain." She drew a breath. "You recognized mine last night." Alaric did not deny it. "Whitcombe was once tied to this estate." Her fingers tightened around her cloak. "Tied how?" "Your family served Ashcombe generations ago," he said slowly. "Then they vanished. No records, no explanations, just silence." Elara's pulse quickened. "And you think that concerns me?" "I think," Alaric replied, "that people do not vanish from Ashcombe history without reason." For a moment, Elara considered lying. She had practiced deception for years, but something in Alaric's expression, measured, earnest, dangerous in its restraint, made her pause. "My mother warned me never to return here," she said quietly. "She said Ashcombe was where promises were broken." Alaric's jaw tightened. "Your mother knew my father." The words landed between them like a blade. "She trusted him," Elara continued, "and she paid for it." Before Alaric could respond, a servant hurried toward them, face pale. "Your Grace," the man said urgently, "there's been a disturbance near the old West Wing." Alaric turned sharply. "What kind of disturbance?" "A sealed room," the servant swallowed, "has been opened, and inside there were documents." "With the name Whitcombe?" Elara felt the world tilt. Alaric looked at her then, not as a duke assessing a guest, but as a man standing at the edge of a long-buried truth. "It seems," he said quietly, "you're not leaving after all." And somewhere deep within the Ashcombe Estate, the past had begun to wake. The West Wing had been closed for as long as anyone could remember. Few servants even knew the corridor existed, and fewer still had reason to venture near it. The air there felt older, heavier, as though the walls themselves had grown accustomed to silence. When Duke Alaric pushed open the door at the corridor's end, the sound echoed farther than it should have. Elara stood just behind him, her cloak drawn close around her shoulders. The room beyond was smaller than she had imagined. Plain, almost disappointingly so. No hidden wealth. No grand scandal laid bare. Only a writing desk, a narrow window clouded with age, and a chest pushed against the far wall. "So this is it," Elara said quietly. Alaric nodded. "This room was sealed after my father's death." No explanation was given. He crossed the threshold slowly, as if entering a place that might judge him. The chest was unlocked. That detail alone unsettled him. Inside lay letters, carefully folded, tied with ribbon faded to a dull grey. Elara did not reach for them. She had learned that the truth, when rushed, often struck harder than expected. Alaric picked up the first letter. His brow furrowed as he read, then tightened as he continued. "These are correspondences," he said. "Private ones." "Between whom?" Elara asked. Alaric hesitated. "My father, and a woman named Margaret Whitcombe." Elara's breath caught, though she masked it quickly. "My mother." The letters did not speak of romance. That would have been easier. They spoke, instead of trust, of reliance, of promises made in confidence, away from witnesses and titles. Margaret Whitcombe had not been a servant in the ordinary sense. She had advised, observed, listened when others could not be trusted. She was promised protection, Alaric said, his voice low. A place, security, something in return for her silence. Elara's fingers curled slowly. And when the time came? Alaric did not answer at once. He found another letter, shorter, written in a hurried hand. "She was dismissed," he said finally, quietly. "No records, no explanation." Elara turned toward the window, though it offered little view. "She told me Ashcombe was built on broken words." Another document lay beneath the letters. "Not written by Margaret, by Alaric's father." "It mentions a child," Alaric said. Elara did not ask which child. "She was to be kept away from this estate," he continued, "for her own safety." Elara's voice was steady. "Safety from what?" Alaric closed the document. "From the truth." Silence stretched between them, heavy and unkind. "You didn't know," Elara said at last. "No," he replied, "but I benefit from what was done." Elara turned back to him then, her expression unreadable. "And what will you do with that knowledge, Your Grace?" Alaric met her gaze. "I don't know yet," she nodded, as if expecting that answer. "Then neither do I." Footsteps echoed faintly in the corridor beyond. Someone was approaching. Elara stepped back instinctively, the shadows reclaiming her presence. "Whatever my mother was to your father," she said quietly, "it was never meant to be remembered." Alaric watched her closely. "And you?" A pause. "I'm only here," Elara replied, to ensure the past doesn't bury the wrong person again. Before he could ask what she meant, she moved toward the door. And for the first time since that night began, Duke Alaric Ashcombe understood that Elara Whitcombe was not merely uncovering history. She was correcting it. By midday, the Ashcombe Estate had changed. What had once felt merely grand now carried an undercurrent of vigilance. Servants moved with greater purpose. Doors that had stood open were quietly closed. Conversations lowered the moment Elara passed. Word had not spread openly, but curiosity had a way of seeping through stone walls. Duke Alaric felt it keenly. He had ordered Elara to remain within the estate, for her safety, yet the words echoed unpleasantly in his own mind. Protection was a concept he understood well. It had governed his life since boyhood. But as he watched Elara walk beside him through the eastern gallery, her posture calm and her expression composed, he questioned whether safety was truly what he was offering. "You have guards posted at every corridor," Elara observed lightly. "Yes," Alaric replied. "It's precaution." "Or containment," she said without accusation. He stopped walking. "You believe I would confine you?" Elara turned to face him. "I believe men in power often mistake concern for entitlement." The words struck deeper than he expected. "That is not my intention," Alaric said. "I know," she answered. "Which is what makes it dangerous." From the far end of the gallery, Lady Rowena Vale watched them in silence. She had chosen her position carefully, close enough to observe, distant enough to remain unseen. What unsettled her was not Elara's presence, but Alaric's reaction to it. He listened to the woman. He hesitated around her. Those were not habits he had ever formed. Later, over tea in the smaller drawing room, Rowena finally spoke. "You intend to keep her here," she said. "For now," Alaric replied. "And after?" Rowena asked calmly. "Will you offer her protection indefinitely, or will you decide what becomes of her?" Elara, seated across from them, met Rowena's gaze. "I don't require a decision made on my behalf." Rowena's lips curved faintly. "No, you require one made for you." "That is how estates like Ashcombe function." Alaric set his cup down. Enough. But the tension had already taken root. That evening, Elara found herself alone in the library, drawn there by instinct rather than intent. The shelves were tall and crowded, the scent of leather and dust familiar in a way that unsettled her. She traced a finger along the spines, pausing at volumes she felt she should not recognize. "You always return to this room," Alaric said from behind her. She did not startle. "It feels known." "Or remembered," he said. She turned slowly. "Careful, Your Grace. You're beginning to sound like a man who wants answers he may not like." "I already dislike what I've learned," he replied. They stood close now. Too close. Candlelight softened the lines of his face, revealing fatigue beneath authority. Elara saw it, and understood its danger. "You should let me leave," she said quietly. "And if I do," Alaric asked, "who will protect you?" Her eyes met his, steady and unyielding. "From you?" The silence that followed was sharp. "I don't want to claim you," Alaric said at last. "I want to understand you." Elara's voice lowered. Those two desires often become the same thing. From the doorway, Lord Benedict listened unseen, a slow smile forming. The walls of Ashcombe had protected many secrets over the years, but none as volatile as the one now standing within them. And as night fell once more, protection no longer felt like safety. It felt like the first step towards something neither of them could control. The rain began just after dusk. It fell softly at first, a whisper against the tall windows of Ashcombe, then steadily, as though the night itself wished to conceal what was about to surface. Elara watched it from the small sitting room she had been given, her reflection faint in the glass. Every instinct told her she was closer to the truth than she had ever been, and that remaining here much longer would come at a cost. A knock sounded at the door. Before she could respond, it opened. Lord Benedict Ashcombe stepped inside without invitation, closing the door carefully behind him. Unlike earlier, his usual lightness was gone. His expression was thoughtful, calculated. "You should be packing," he said. Elara turned slowly. "Is that a warning?" "It's advice," Benedict replied. "My brother has always struggled to see danger when it arrives quietly." Elara folded her arms. "Then speak plainly." Benedict studied her for a moment, as though deciding how much truth to spend. "My father once told me there was a promise made in this house, long before Alaric became Duke, a promise never meant to survive daylight." Elara felt her pulse quicken. To whom? Benedict's gaze never wavered. To a woman who trusted the wrong man. The room felt suddenly smaller. "That promise involved a child," Benedict continued, "and a condition. If certain truths ever came to light, that child would be brought back, not as a guest, but as leverage." Elara's voice was calm, though her chest tightened. "You're suggesting my presence here was arranged?" "I'm suggesting," Benedict said softly, "that very little at Ashcombe is accidental." Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Benedict stepped back, his expression returning to its familiar ease. "You didn't hear this from me." The door opened again. Duke Alaric stood there, rainwater darkening his coat, his face drawn with an intensity Elara had not yet seen. His eyes found hers instantly. "You were meant to be told," he said. "Told what?" she asked. "That my father planned for this," Alaric replied. "For you. For tonight." He crossed the room, stopping a careful distance away. "There was an agreement made before dawn, on the eve of a decision that would have altered this estate forever." Elara swallowed. "And the agreement failed." "Yes," he said, "because someone intervened." "Who?" Alaric hesitated. "My mother." The revelation hung between them. "She demanded the promise be buried," he continued. "She believed it was the only way to protect you." Elara shook her head slowly. "Or control the damage." "Perhaps both," Alaric admitted. "But the agreement still exists. Written. Sealed. And according to these documents, it has not expired." Elara stepped back. "What does it demand?" Alaric's voice lowered. "That when the child returned, Ashcombe would owe her a choice." Silence. "A choice of what?" Elara asked. Alaric looked at her then, not as Duke, not as protector, but as a man standing before an unknown future. "A choice," he said, "that could strip this estate of everything it has ever claimed." The rain struck harder against the windows, and Elara realised with chilling clarity that the night Duke Alaric fell in love was not the most dangerous thing to happen at Ashcombe. It was what came next. By morning the house knew. It was not spoken aloud, not openly acknowledged, but Ashcombe had always carried news through silence rather than sound. Doors closed more softly. Servants avoided certain corridors. Eyes lingered where they should not. Elara felt it the moment she stepped into the light-filled breakfast room and found the usual warmth replaced with careful distance. She had not slept. The knowledge Benedict had revealed, and the truth Alaric had confirmed, weighed heavily upon her. The agreement, the promise, the choice Ashcombe owed her. Whatever it was, she understood now that it came at a cost greater than she had prepared for. Duke Alaric entered moments later. He looked unchanged to any casual observer, composed, immaculate, untouchable, but Elara saw the strain beneath the surface. His movements were slower. His gaze searched for her before anything else. "Walk with me," he said quietly. They passed through the garden paths in silence, dew clinging to the roses, the morning air cool against their skin. Ashcombe looked peaceful in daylight, as though it had never held secrets at all. "You intend to leave," Alaric said. Elara did not deny it. "I was never meant to stay." "You were meant to return," he corrected. That much is clear. She stopped walking. I will not be used to settle a debt between ghosts. I know, he said. That is why this choice must be yours. She studied him then, searching for the man behind the title. And if my choice costs you everything? Alaric exhaled slowly. Then Ashcombe will endure without me. The words were spoken without drama, without plea, but they struck harder than any declaration of love. Elara felt her resolve waver. You speak as though you've already decided, she said. I have, Alaric replied. About you. Her breath caught. That is not an answer. No, he said. It's a confession. He stopped beneath the old oak, the one she now recognized from the documents, the tree beneath which the promise had been sealed decades ago. I did not expect this, Alaric continued. I did not seek it. But loving you has undone every certainty I carried into that night. Elara looked away, fear and longing colliding within her. Love does not erase history. No, he agreed, but it gives us the courage to face it. Footsteps approached along the path. Lady Rowena Vale halted a respectful distance away, her expression composed but grave. The families are gathering, Rowena said. They've heard enough to demand answers. Elara turned back to Alaric. This is where it ends. For one of us, he said. She shook her head. For both, if we're not careful. As the bells of the estate rang for noon, Elara made her decision, not aloud, not yet, but in the quiet resolve of her posture. She would not allow Ashcombe to decide her fate, and she would not allow love to blind her to the truth. That night, long after the estate slept, Elara Whitcombe left Ashcombe without farewell. She left behind a letter, and with it, a truth Duke Alaric Ashcombe was not prepared to read. Duke Alaric Ashcombe read the letter 3 times before the words finally settled. It had been left on the desk in the West Wing, placed with deliberate care, as though Elara knew exactly where he would go first. The paper was unmarked, the handwriting steady, too steady for a farewell written in haste. Your Grace, if you are reading this, then I have already done what I came here to do. Alaric's hand tightened around the page. She wrote without apology, without tenderness. And yet, every word carried a weight that pressed painfully against his chest. Elara did not write of love, not directly. She wrote of truth. She confirmed what Benedict had only suspected. Her return to Ashcombe had not been coincidence, nor curiosity, nor fate alone. It had been obligation. The promise made before dawn had not merely been between 2 families. It had been sealed with terms. Terms designed to protect Ashcombe's power at the expense of a single woman and her child. I was raised knowing one thing, the letter continued, that Ashcombe owed a debt it never intended to repay. I did not come to claim a place. I came to claim an ending. Alaric felt the ground shift beneath him. She had come not to destroy Ashcombe, but to decide whether it deserved to survive as it was. The letter revealed what the documents had not. The choice owed to her was not symbolic. It was legal. Binding. If exercised, it would force the estate to publicly acknowledge the buried promise, expose the deception that had preserved its reputation, and strip the Ashcombe title of the protections it had long enjoyed. I could have demanded justice, she wrote. I could have let the truth consume everything you inherited. And I almost did. His breath caught. But then there was you. Alaric closed his eyes. She admitted it then, quietly, painfully, that loving him had not been part of her design, that the night he fell in love was the night she nearly abandoned her purpose. That is why I had to leave. The letter ended. Because Ashcombe deserves truth, and you deserve a choice that is not poisoned by affection. When you are ready to decide what kind of duke you wish to be, you will know where to find me. No signature, no farewell, only a pressed wildflower tucked between the pages. By noon, the families had arrived, Demands were made, questions raised, accusations whispered behind gloved hands, but Alaric said nothing. He stood at the head of the long table, silent, his expression unreadable. Lady Rowena watched him closely. Benedict said nothing at all. That evening, as the estate settled once more into uneasy quiet, Duke Alaric Ashcombe made his decision. He ordered the West Wing opened permanently. He summoned the estate's solicitor, and he instructed that the full Ashcombe records, unaltered, be prepared for public review. The night he fell in love had cost him peace. By dawn, it would cost him power. And somewhere beyond the gates of Ashcombe, Elara Whitcombe waited, no longer as a guest nor as a mystery, but as the one person who now held the future of the noble Duke in her hands. The story did not end there. It had only just begun.